what our minds have like a perspective on carbohydrates has turned into is that if I eat this donut, I have to starve myself the next day. I have to guilt myself. I have to punish myself because I shouldn't eat these things because they are bad for my body. Now, if you eat that every single day, it's not good. It's not good for your body, right? But in moderation, if for consistency, if I eat 80% well throughout the week, I'm fine to have a donut or two. And that's the other part too, is enjoy it. Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone to our Thursday chat. I'm Matt. This is my lovely. You go ahead, Jilisa.
I'm Jilisa. In case you forgot my name.
Just in case you guys forgot, we're excited to be talking about nutrition today. And a fan favorite is carbs. Whether you just look at what you see on the newspaper, not the newspaper, on magazines as you check out at the grocery store and stuff like that.
I would say a fan favorite and a fan fear.
Yeah.
So
I should say favorite in terms of it's a topic people want to know about.
yeah.
And I saw it in the poll, 3 people voted for nutrition now. So here it is. Let's chat.
Yeah, we're gonna do a bit of a nutrition series. Once a week maybe we'll talk about break down the macronutrients. So we're gonna start with carbs. Maybe next week we will talk about proteins. And the week after that, we'll tackle the fats. So just getting into a little bit more of like, we're not gonna go too sciencey because I don't really think that part's overly important to discuss in depth unless you're really interested in that part, but more so the basics of what you should know, why you don't need to be afraid of it, and how to just start like incorporating good parts of the carbohydrate family into your regular eating routine.
Yes. So
Yes.
macronutrients, you got your fats, carbs, and protein. So macro meaning the big pieces, you have your micronutrients. But predominantly, mostly we talk about macronutrients because there are micronutrients within most foods. And when you think about macro. So do you want to start us off why you don't have to be afraid of carbohydrates?
Yeah. So I think the most common fear people have is that, like, we hear all the time, like, oh, if I eat carbs I'm going to get fat, right? That is just like a simple statement that I've heard many times, and that's a very untrue statement for the majority of people. It's that if you overeat anything you might gain weight. However, it just so happens that very few people want to like overeat lean protein or overeat just fats. Maybe that's not true, but carbs have been developed and processed to be overly palatable and very hard to stop eating when you're choosing those simple, highly processed carbs. So I think that's where oftentimes the fear factor comes in, is carbs get such a bad rap just because they have been now created to be really difficult to stop eating, right? So we think about things like pizza or cake or cookies or, you know, all those things that come in a package. So like chips and, um, what your typical junk food would look like. Manufacturing companies put billions of dollars into research into how to make their food harder and harder to stop eating. And so, of course, if you're addicted to those kinds of things, you are going to gain weight if you overeat them. So I think that's where the fear factor of carbs come in, because the majority of junk food gets put into that category. When in reality, carbs are like the most beautiful food, and they have so much good stuff that is so valuable and beneficial to our bodies that carbs should be something that you're purposefully including in most of your meals. The trick is getting the good carbs and learning to enjoy the maybe less nutrient dense carbs in moderation. So yeah, I think that's where we can differentiate between like the fear and the actually like beneficial carbs.
Yeah.
So carbs are generally, when I talk with clients, generally we break carbs down into like simple carbs, which are like those overly processed carbs. We call them simple because they're easy for our bodies to break down, which generally is not necessarily a positive thing. And then those complex carbs that are full of nutrients, they are like our slow burning energy. Those are the things that we want to include in each of our meals. You were going to say something, sorry.
No, that's okay. If you think about it, if you look in nature, carbohydrates, like sources of carbohydrates that are naturally occurring,
Mm.
aren't mixed with saturated fats like they are now, right? So if you think of a donut, it's loaded with saturated fats and carbohydrates, which makes it really addicting and really not, I wouldn't say satiating, but pleasurable, right? Our senses are on fire, the dopamine hits, but it's not nutrient dense. It's it has a lot of calories to it, but it's not nutrient dense. So our body's not feeling full, right? We can eat a lot more. Like you mentioned, you don't really overeat something like ground beef or a steak because we're getting full, right? Like you, you're not going to overeat steak usually. And if you do, you're going to be hurting pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. Maybe we were listening to something together. Maybe it was that book, but that I had like, admittedly, I should know this as a nutrition coach and for how much I have done in terms of education. But maybe it was in that comfort book that we were listening to of no source or no food source from nature naturally is a carbohydrate and a fat together. Whereas like meat would be protein and fat, or like, yeah, lots of different combinations, but nothing from nature is a carb and a fat, which is generally those hyper palatable foods. So yeah, we have created this problem ourselves. So
Yeah.
that is a really interesting point, is like nature knows what our bodies need. But
And
that, yeah,
there
that's
will
true.
be foods that have a little bit, like if you look at nuts as an example, they have both fats and protein,
Mhm.
but predominantly it's fat. So you just say it's a fat source. And if we're trying to define what carbohydrates are, you can think of wheat, um, things like oatmeal, then you have bagels, you have fruits, vegetables as a source of carbohydrates, right? It's a slower acting sugar though in something like vegetables.
Yeah, so those would be more of like um, your complex carbs.
Right.
Yeah. So when I talk with clients, I mean, the majority of my clients are what we would call level one eaters, which means like we're just eating for our health. Whereas like level two or level three, you're eating for performance or for competition or something like that. But when we're just talking about basic nutrition, which is where 99% of people are, myself, yourself included, we just talk about how to include the right amount of carbs in each meal each day. So taking away like that fear factor of carbs being like this terrible thing and learning to incorporate complex and healthy carbs in each of your meals, while also planning for those really enjoyable carbs that aren't necessarily going to add to your health. So those things like pizza and cake and all the good stuff, or chips if you're like that. Um, so it's kind of funny. I had a client the other day and we were talking about meal planning a little bit. And I was like, yeah, you could add some rice with that. And she was like, wait, I can eat rice? And I just was like, huh, yes, of course. Like, of course you can have rice. And it's shocking, like how surprised people are still sometimes of like, oh, this is okay. And that just tells me like how strongly diet culture and media have poorly portrayed carbs, and that like makes my heart sad because it's okay to have carbs. So just like relearning the basics again is really important for people, I think. So we talk about finding the right portions for each person. Everybody's different with their like carb tolerance and how they feel, but carbs are generally the first, not generally, they are the first thing that our bodies use for energy. So that carb is going to go straight to your liver. Well, not straight. I mean, I think there's a few things that have to be, but it
Yeah.
goes to your liver, and that fills your energy store. So when you work out, when you're brain thinks, it uses carbohydrates. So when you're moving your body, when you're thinking, your body is using carbs. So if you completely cut them out, I mean, your body's an amazing thing and it will learn to use other things, but most people don't need to do that. So we talk about how to find the right amount of carb for each person, but dependent on like your activity level and what your goals are. Like if you are a weightlifter or you're trying to gain strength, or if you're trying to lose fat, then we kind of figure out what the right amounts are. So it's basically it's okay to eat carbs. That's like my general thing to say.
Yeah. And there will, like you said at the start, there will be like factors that might apply to certain people that maybe they can't digest carbs as well, as maybe they don't do as well as the carbs. Like those are the uh anomaly, right? It's not consistent. Like sometimes people might need to do something like a ketogenic diet and try to enter ketosis and all these different ways of producing energy. But I think most of what happens around carbohydrates is the mindset, right? Like we've continually heard how bad carbohydrates are, and it's like even me, right? It took me a long time, and I studied lots, and I've been an athlete my whole life, and in the coach as a coach, well over 13 years now, and it can be confusing at times, even though I have a lot of certificates and stuff like that in this.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, it's a lot of mindset stuff. And that's why with our coaching program, our transformation program, the biggest piece of it is mindset, like helping people shift their mindset. Instead of looking at good or bad food, or looking at food as good or bad, you look at them as good, better, best, right? So if we look at carbs, so if we have an apple, a piece of pizza,
Pizza
oh,
pizza.
pizza, or a donut, well, we're going to say, hey, my best option is the apple. The better option probably would be the pizza, right? I'm going to get a mixture of different things. The
Plus
good
it's
option, yes. The good option would be the donut there, right? So you have three different choices and good, better, best. And that totally takes a lot of pressure off, because what our minds have like a perspective on carbohydrates has turned into is that if I eat this donut, I have to starve myself the next day. I have to guilt myself. I have to punish myself because I shouldn't eat these things because they are bad for my body. Now, if you eat that every single day, it's not good. It's not good for your body, right? But in moderation, for consistency, if I eat 80% well throughout the week, I'm fine to have a donut or two on the weekend. Or we have pizza nights in the Chenard household and we really enjoy it. And that's the other part too, is enjoy it. If you're going to
yeah.
have something that is maybe a little more, like you said, that simple carbohydrate, that mixture of fat and carbs that is so delightful to experience, you're
Mhm.
going to have it, enjoy it, right? Really experience it, share it with people and have an experience.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the most like rewarding and eye-opening activities, or I don't know what you want to call it, but things that I think you probably do too, that we do with our clients, is getting them to plan. So we call it like the 80-20. 80% of the time you're going to eat healthy, whole, nutritious food. 20% of the time you're going to choose foods out of just joy and enjoyment out of them. So I will sit down with my client and say, okay, like what does your week look like? When do you plan on having your 20% that you really enjoy? And what's that going to look like? And let's plan ahead so that when you have that, you know, like, okay, I don't have to feel guilty about this, and nor should you ever, but this is something that's actually good for me because this is bringing me joy. This is like something, like food is meant to be enjoyed. This is something I look forward to. If I completely cut this out, I'm going to feel so restricted, and it's going to be really hard to stick to my 80%. So let's plan this out. Let's make this really enjoyable. Let's have a plan for, the next day of like getting back to choosing nutrient dense foods. And that way, always having that day or that meal or that time when you're like, I'm just going to eat out of enjoyment, really helps to continue choosing healthy things, because it's like, oh, this isn't the only time I'm ever going to get to eat a donut again. If I want another donut, I can have another one in a couple of days, because
Mhm.
I know that I'm doing a really great job most of the time. So there's no reason to feel guilty about this. And that also means I don't have to have 17 donuts today because I know that I'm going to have another opportunity in a couple days. And it just takes away that whole like failing versus like feeling guilty and all that stuff, or like eating all or nothing. It's really
Mhm.
like a really freeing way to know that like, cool, I'm going to eat really healthy, and then I'm also going to be able to enjoy things. And that doesn't mean that on occasion, like someone invites you over for a dinner randomly and you go and then they serve you cake, but you didn't plan that. It doesn't mean you can't have any. It's just like, okay, cool. So that happened. You ate it in moderation because you knew this wasn't the only time in your life ever that you're going to eat cake. And now let's move on. There's nothing terribly wrong about that. It's more so like, let's enjoy that moment. Let's like think about how, that was something that was awesome because you got to enjoy it with people you were with and whatever, and then move on. It doesn't have to be that sucked. I'm a terrible person. I just fell off my diet. Now I need to starve myself the next day or work out for 17 hours. It's just what it is, and that's okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
100% agree. And that plays into the yo-yo diet, right? Like this is my marker where I take notes as Jilisa is talking for those that can see. It's my
Hair notes.
illustration. You can't
I
see it.
was
Yeah.
writing hair notes.
So you do quote unquote good, really
Yeah.
good. You
Yeah.
restrict, you restrict, you restrict, you're losing weight, you're getting towards your goals, and then it's not sustainable. So you actually crash and burn. And actually, sometimes people gain more weight than they lost, right? Because your body's craving these things, and you're kind of playing with survival mechanisms in your body, right? It's going to try to refuel itself. It's going to find these things, and it's going to take it in. So instead of just, because there is aesthetics, right? Like we all want to look strong and feel capable and um, look functional too, right? Like that's not a bad thing to feel confident about body, but also think about when you're eating food, how does it make you feel? How does it make you feel energized? Does it decrease brain fog?
Yeah.
Does it or increase mental clarity? Like I always like to talk about it as what's it increasing? Does it make me a better husband to you if I eat a little bit better? If I try to eat more complex carbs, does it decrease inflammation in my body? Right? That's a big
Mhm.
thing if we're not predominantly eating um, a more balanced diet. And you
Yeah.
start to attach to the feeling, and then the byproduct is weight loss, muscle gain, and all these things. And I had another little point there, but I think that's probably good for that. It's a
Yeah.
mixture of mindset, mixture of nutrition. And I want to invite anyone, if you feel like you're in prison with food, right? Like I'm sure you can attest to this, Jaleesa, is it can be, and even for myself, it can feel like you're trapped, right? Like when you want something so bad, and then you're afraid that if you eat it, you're going to gain 30 pounds in a day, which we know doesn't make sense, but it's still scary, right?
Yeah.
If you feel this, just comment below and comment.
Me personally, because not everybody maybe wants to
Yeah,
share
just
the,
message Jaleesa personally. She's more than happy to help. She's a rock star with this, and that's your really big focus is helping setting people free of that fear of food, so they can feel nourished and energetic and be the best them.
for sure. And maybe before we stop, I'll just like say, because I think it's important to be upfront and transparent about this, is like I didn't eat carbs for a long time because I was afraid of them, and it messed with my mind a lot and my body. And through a lot of my recovery process from just that whole experience, I learned that when I just gave my body what it asked me for, so when I craved carbs, if I actually just ate them consistently, I would fully avoid that binge feeling and then feeling like I had to restrict. And without really trying or focusing on it, after I started eating carbs, like my body became the leanest it has ever been. Well, to an extent, because I avoided those like high moments of like eating all the carbs in the whole world and then not eating any, which really was when I gained the most weight. So, learning to have a healthy relationship with carbs and with food is a lot less scary than people think it is. And our bodies are smart and they know what to do with them. And I think it's more like getting our minds right with it. And then it's amazing to see what your body will do. And just like even the strength that you will feel from consistently having good carbs in your body. It's a beautiful thing your body is, and it's very smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned how it affected your mental, right? And mentally and physically. And if you
It's
look,
like such an
sorry, I think you froze there. You're freezing every once in a while. But essentially, we, like Jilisa, as she alluded to, she struggled with food for a long time in that sense. And it can affect mental health and fitness, relationships, your job. It can affect a lot, right? Like if you're talking about not being able to go to a party and enjoy a piece of cake because it's scary,
Mhm.
that's costing a lot in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining. If you have any
We talked for a long
questions,
time about carbs.
what's that?
I said we talked for a long time about carbs.
Hey, I mean, they're a great, fantastic thing.
I really like them.
Yeah, I mean, we posted a picture. I posted a picture on my page of us having a cookie and a muffin yesterday, and I still feel fairly fit.
Yeah. And I'm going to just post a link to just a really straightforward article about the basics of carbs, and maybe also a link or a picture of what healthy carbs actually are, just for those who are just learning or who are more curious about that. So I'll post that below.
See you, friends.